Hey, super learners. We are going to be talking about a very special person today in our story. We're going to be learning a lot of facts about this person. Some of you may have heard of him, but I'm guessing most of you have not heard of him, and that's okay. That's why we're going to be learning about him. So this man, his name was Martin, and he was alive a really long time ago, like before I was born. No offense to all the people who are older than me. So he was a very special man. He believed that everybody should be treated the same, and that everybody should have the same rights. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But a long time ago, I know it's crazy to believe, but there were some people that believed that you shouldn't play together if your skin was different. I know, that's so crazy, right? But it happened, true life. It really did happen. And there were actually really big rules about it. They're called laws. And even grown-ups even have to follow the laws. So there were some people that really believed that if you had different colored skin, you shouldn't be playing with um, those people with different colored skin. So if you had lighter skin, like I do, I wasn't allowed to play with like Miss Gillison or even Mrs. Sanchi because our skin colors are different. So it's real life. It really happened. It made a lot of people sad. It made a lot of people angry because some people with like the lighter skin, like me, had special rules. And then people with darker skin, like Miss Gillison or Mrs. Hanchey, had other special rules that they couldn't be anywhere near people with light skin or white skin, and couldn't even use the same bathroom, the same water fountain, couldn't use the same playground as people with light skin. So just want to talk about that and talk about how Martin, really cool guy, kind of changed things with the power of his words and not his fists. He's a really cool guy. So here we are going to read an informational text about his name is Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we celebrate his birthday every year because he's so important that like pretty much a whole, like all the schools and even some businesses take the day off to remember all of his awesomeness. So this is going to be a picture book of Martin Luther King Jr. And it is written by David A. Adler, illustrated by Robert Casilla. And just to let you know, I know that you're going to have a lot of questions, but we will be reading this again so I can answer a few more of your questions. Okay, so today just kind of listen and try to kind of get a feel for what was going on. And then when we read it again, I'll be able to answer some more of those questions, help out a little bit more. So a picture book of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of America's great leaders. He was a powerful speaker, and he spoke out against laws which kept Black people out of many schools and jobs. He led protests and marches demanding fair laws for all people. Excuse me. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin's father was a pastor. That's kind of like our version of a priest, but in a different faith church. His mother had been a teacher. Martin had an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel. Young Martin liked to play baseball, football, and basketball. He liked to ride his bicycle and to sing. He often sang in his father's church. So there's Martin with his brother Alfred Daniel and his sister Willie Christine. Young Martin played in his backyard with his friends. One day, he was told that two of his friends would no longer play with him because they were white and he was black. Martin cried. He didn't understand why the color of his skin should matter to anyone. Martin's mother told him that many years ago, Black people were brought in chains to America and sold as slaves. She told him that long before Martin was born, the slaves had been set free. However, there were still some people who did not treat Black people fairly. In Atlanta, where Martin lived, and elsewhere in the United States, there were white-only signs. Black people were not allowed in some parks, pools, hotels, restaurants, and even schools. Blacks were kept out of many jobs. So again, way back then, because they had different colored skin, they weren't allowed to go to the same school as the white kids, which seems absolutely crazy to me, because it shouldn't matter what your skin color is, as long as you can have a good heart and know that God loves you and treat each other nicely and fairly. Not back then. Martin learned to read at home before he was old enough to start school. All through his childhood, he read books about Black leaders. And we'll talk about these more in about a month. So we have Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and George Washington Carver. Martin was a good student. He finished high school 2 years early and was just 15 when he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. At college, Martin decided to become a minister, like his dad. After Martin graduated from Morehouse, he studied for a doctorate at Boston University. It means he studied a lot of work and had to go to school for a very long time. He was very smart. While he was there, he met Coretta Scott. She was studying music. They fell in love and married. In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. began his first job as a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama. The next year, Rosa Parks, a Black woman, was arrested in Montgomery for sitting in the white-only section of a bus. So a little bit about that. Even on buses, there were parts where people with darker color skin couldn't sit down, and it was reserved for white people only. So she was tired, probably after a hard day of work, and she was tired and she sat down on the bus, and a white man told her, "Hey, you got to move. You can't sit here." And she said, "No." So the police arrested her because technically she was breaking the law. We'll talk about it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a protest. A protest is when a whole bunch of people get together when something makes them upset, but they talk about it. They don't use their fists. They don't get angry. They might be angry with their words, but they're not going to hurt anybody. And they're trying to make a change. That's the most important part about a protest, is that you're trying to make some kind of change. Black people throughout the city refused to ride the buses. Dr. King said, "There comes a time when people get tired of being kicked out." So because all of those people stopped riding the bus wasn't making as much money. Do you think the bus wants a lot of money? Let's see what happens. One night, While Dr. King was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. Martin's followers were angry. They wanted to fight. Martin told them to go home peacefully. We must love our white brothers, he said. We must meet hate with love. So even though somebody threw a bomb in his house and like basically ruined his house, he wasn't angry. He wasn't loud about it. He just said, you know what? It's okay. We will change this. We will make things better, but not by using our fists. Don't get angry. Go home peacefully. Again, I know you're going to have a lot of questions, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. Maybe after this reading, and then definitely more in the next time you read the story. The bus protest lasted almost a year. So that's when all the Black people were refusing. I'm not getting on that bus until you let me sit down. And then when it ended, there were no more white-only sections on buses. So because they were protesting peacefully, they were trying to make a change peacefully, they got the rule changed. It's pretty cool. Dr. King decided to move back to Atlanta in 1960. There, he continued to lead peaceful protests against white-only waiting rooms, lunch counters, and restrooms. Even the bathrooms had white-only signs. He led many marches for freedom, to be free, have the ability to do what you need to do without any special rules keeping you back. In 1963, Dr. King led the biggest march of all, the March on Washington. This is his most famous thing. More than 200,000 Black and white people followed him. I have a dream, he said in his speech. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So instead of people saying, oh, you have Black skin, I'm not going to play with you, or oh, you have darker skin, you can't use this bathroom, or you can't sit on this bus, he's saying the content of their character, their personality, who they are. So if you are friendly, if you are making good choices, then that's what you should be judged on, not the color of your skin. Martin was such a smart man. The next year, in 1964, Dr. King was awarded one of the greatest honors any man or woman can win, the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a super duper special award that not many people get because it's hard to earn. You have to work very hard for it. The country was changing. New laws were passed, so those new rules were coming in. Black people could go to the same school as white people. They could go to the same stores, restaurants, and hotels. White-only signs were against the law. So before these signs, the white-only laws, white-only signs, that was the law. Only white people can use this or go to this place. But now the laws, the rules have changed, and now these signs are breaking the rules. So because Martin and all those people worked so hard and they peacefully stood up for what they believed in, the rules got changed. Dr. King told his followers to protest peacefully. but there were some riots and violence. So riots sometimes start out as protests, but unfortunately, some people get a little too excited, a little bit too angry and frustrated, and they start breaking things and breaking into stores and trying to hurt other people. And that's where it's no longer a protest. When a protest um, begins to have violence and things are being broken, people are getting hurt, then it's no longer a protest. It's what we call a riot. And you may have heard on the news or from your grown-ups listening to the news that there have been some riots recently. And unfortunately, riots do happen sometimes. But we have to make good choices and know when it's okay to do things and when it's not okay. Then in April 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. He planned to march so Black and white garbage workers would get the same pay for the same work. On April 4th in Memphis, Dr. King stood outside his motel room. Another man, James Earl Ray, was hiding nearby. He pointed a rifle at Dr. King. He fired the gun. An hour later, Dr. King was dead. So, to explain that a little bit, as I mentioned, there were some people that really believed that white people were better, and that they just should have their own special rules because they were white, and really, really did not like anything that Martin said. They're just don't believe it. I don't believe it. That's not true. White people are best. And this guy, this man, James Earl Ray, was so upset with Martin that instead of trying to have a conversation and using his words, he used a gun and he killed somebody. He killed Dr. King. So it's really sad, but sometimes people make really bad choices, especially when they maybe don't know about God. They don't have God in their hearts. So it's really sad. So Dr. King did die. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of a world free of hate, prejudice, and violence. Carved on the stone which marks his grave are the words, "I'm free at last," which was part of his really big, important "I Have a Dream" speech. And that was a picture book of Martin Luther King Jr. It's a lot to take in. That's what we would call a heavy topic, a very sensitive topic for a lot of our families that have ever been mistreated because of where their family comes from or the language that they speak or the color of their skin. So it's our job to start early to learn what's right and what's wrong. And if you want to make a change, how to do it in the best way possible, to do it in a peaceful way. So we'll be talking a little bit more about Dr. King and some important things that he did and some of the important words that made the big difference. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you later. Toodaloo.